Good morning. You listen to FloorDaily.net, and I'm Kemp Harr. This morning, my guest is Dr. Bob Peoples, who's the Executive Director with CARE, which stands for Carpet America Recovery Effort. Bob, how you doing?
I'm doing great, thank you. Always good to be with you on the air.
Yes, thanks for getting with me on a spur-of-the-moment request. I wanted to raise the visibility on this meeting you're going to have next week in Atlanta. CARE, most people know CARE has two meetings. They have a big annual meeting, which is usually in a really nice place. And then you also have an entrepreneurs meeting, which is next Wednesday in Atlanta, right?
That is correct, Kim.
And why don't you just tell our listeners, what is the entrepreneur meeting?
Well, the entrepreneur meeting is really the meeting that gives those on the front line, the entrepreneur community, an opportunity to network with one another, which is probably the hallmark of everything that CARE does at these meetings. Speak to equipment vendors, perhaps most importantly, share their opinions about what is and is not working, and ideas on how you can tackle those problems, and to give CARE a chance to hear from them directly what more we can do to help their cause.
Bob, I was traveling in Italy not long ago, and I went to Aquafil's EcoNil plant, and they had a guy there with looked like a ray gun off of Star Trek, and he was walking up to these materials and shooting it and then looking at the gauge, and it was telling him what kind of nylon it was, and those were actually created as a result of this CARE entrepreneur meeting, right?
That's right. It goes back a number of years, but in the early days, the big challenge was how do we identify at that time the four main types of fiber that we were dealing with. Yeah. And there were some basic technologies out there, but we got together and worked with some high-tech people up out in the Boston area to develop two different approaches using modern high-tech technology and computer chips to rapidly, efficiently, and accurately identify the face fiber types. And these are now small, portable, handheld units, relatively lightweight, that are pretty rugged and durable, that are used widely out in the field today.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I wanted to bring that up because I knew that's just one case in point where these people get together. It's a lot of those kind of guys, more the engineer type and less of the sales and marketing type. And so just looking at who's coming this year, can you give us a flavor for the type of people?
The bulk of the attendees are the folks across the U.S. that are heavily involved in both the collection and or the processing of post-consumer carpet and or the production of final products made from those materials coming forward. Yeah. But we'll also have some folks from the carpet industry there. I know that the EPA will likely be with us for part of the time. And, of course, we have our board that'll be there as well.
I know you have some sponsors for this meeting. You might want to give them a shout.
Yep. We're pleased again this year to have a number of our returning sponsors. We've got the Aquafil folks under the EcoNil brand, Interface, J&J Flooring Group, Shaw Floors, the StarNet Group, and Tandis Sentiva. Couldn't do this meeting without them. We're very grateful.
All right. So that meeting, just the details, if somebody wanted to go at the last minute, is on the 23rd. It's at the Hilton Garden Inn at the Atlanta airport, and it starts with the cocktail party on the 22nd, and then it's a full day of the 23rd, right?
That is correct. It'll be a cocktail party, light dinner on the 22nd, and it's at the hotel. And then we'll start at probably about 8:30 on Wednesday morning, 23rd. And while we've got a full agenda planned, this is a meeting we always like to be flexible. So we want to be adaptable to the needs of the entrepreneurs. So as issues arise, as topics come up to discuss, we'll be flexible enough in this agenda to make sure that what they want to talk about is what we talk about at the conference.
Now, Bob, we've got another minute here, and I wanted to catch up with you on one other item. Most people know AB 2398 is the California Reclamation Stewardship Plan, and I think this year you had to submit a new plan to them, and initially that was rejected. Why don't you give us an update on that, if you would?
That's correct, Kent. Actually, August 20th, there was a public hearing held, and CalRecycle officially informed us that they were not accepting the plan that was submitted back at the end of May and offered us a number of recommendations on how we could modify that plan. Now, to be honest about it, the plan was submitted before we had approved a number of the new initiatives that are going on in California, and I think that was the big driver. California really wanted to see the plan in a final stage that included all those initiatives, and for the sake of the listeners, I'll just hit the highlights. We're continuing the current subsidy program for Type 1 and Type 2 payouts out in California, as we always have. But in addition, we've added a 10-cent per pound growth initiative for all Type 1 materials that are coming out of processing of California post-consumer carpet, above a certain threshold. We set an 8.5 million pound a quarter target. So all pounds processed in the quarter get the 6 cents or the 3 cents. But type 1 pounds that are in excess of the 8.5 million pound a target are eligible for a 10 cent a pound incentive. In addition, there's lots of interest in polyester these days, so we put a special incentive on the use of non-nylon materials. That includes both polyester and polypropylene of 12 cents a pound, but that doesn't go to the primary processors. That goes to the next processor or user in the supply chain, if you will. Somebody that's taking fiber output from posted timber carpet and converting it into a useful pellet or a pad or an injection molded part, something that further pulls it through the supply chain and creates demand. And I'll finally say also, we put a request for proposal out there for California universities to submit their ideas on how to process and use non-nylon materials. That RFP can be accessed on the CARE website or the CalRecycle website. And the RFP is open until the early part of December, after which we'll make a decision on the winning university.
Let me ask you, you talked about type 1 and type 2. Tell me the difference there between those.
Yeah, type 1 materials are what we call high value. This is material that's been processed to an extent that the ash content of the output is below 25%. Mm-hmm. So that's the material that's eligible for a 6 cent a pound subsidy. Material that's just ground up, there's no separation of the backing or anything like that. It goes into lower value applications like filler material and such. That's eligible for the 3 cent a pound subsidy.
So when will you get an indication from CalRecycle whether or not they're going to accept your revised plan?
Well, the revised plan is due by the 28th of October, and my guess is with the holidays and all, it'll either be late December or more likely January before we get the official word back. And of course, while they're going through their analysis, we will continue to operate under the currently approved draft plan.
All right, Bob, well, I hope you have a good meeting next week. I appreciate you spending time with us. Again, been talking to Bob Peoples, who's Executive Director with CARE, about his entrepreneurial meeting next week in Atlanta. And you've been listening to Kemp Harr and FloorDaily.net.